Washington, House Speaker Mike Johnson's future in his role as the Speaker could be at risk ahead of a vote next week.
And the battle for the gavel could delay the certification of President-elect Trump's victory.
Madeline Rivera is live in Washington, and she's got the tea to spill on this. Maddie?
Hi, guys. Good morning. The first order of business for the House when Congress convenes January 3rd is electing a House Speaker. It's all about the math. The House clocks in with 434 members with one vacancy, thanks to former Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. The breakdown is 219 Republicans to 215 Democrats. The Speaker of the House must win an outright majority of all members. Current Speaker Mike Johnson is on thin ice with the right flank of his party after last week's debacle over government spending.
Before the last couple of weeks, I was, in his corner, but now I'm, we should consider what's the best path forward. We do need to consider whether, if we're going to advance Mr. Trump's agenda, whether the current leadership is what we need.
I'm really humbled and honored to have President Trump's endorsement for Speaker again. He and I work so well together, so closely together, and we have a lot of big things to do. He recognizes that what we need right now, I think my colleagues recognize this as well, is a proven fighter and a true MAGA conservative, but also someone who can work with every single member of our very diverse House GOP so that we can get President Trump's priorities over the line. That's what's ahead of us. I think this could be the most consequential presidency and Congress of the modern era because we have to fix everything, and it has to start on day one, so we can't waste any time.
Why do we need to think about having to survive something when we have an obvious option here? Mike Johnson has done a good job. Look, anytime the numbers are this close, it's going to be a very difficult job, and there are things that aren't going to go smoothly every single time. And we just have to accept that. Johnson's done a good job. The president trusts him. The president won the election, and a lot of Republicans won because of Donald Trump and the agenda he put forward. So what Donald Trump is saying is, get me a speaker that I trust and that I can work with so we can begin to pass my agenda. That ought to be a good enough reason for any member of the House Republican Conference. We've got a very closely divided House. The only way to move anything forward here is to have teamwork, to stick together. Republicans need to start that process with the Speaker's vote.
All right, guys, we got to talk about a major announcement from President Trump going into the new year, because the new year means a new Congress, and the new Congress needs a new leader. Speaker Mike Johnson, who is the current leader of the Republicans, was just endorsed by President Trump to become Speaker again. Now, I'm going to tell you guys what I think about this endorsement from Trump. Okay, I'm gonna tell you right now that I agree with it and I also disagree with it. I disagree with it more than I agree with it. And I just want to make that known because a lot of people say, oh, you never disagree with Trump. And it's like, no, I do disagree with Trump at times, but I just don't disagree with him often. Okay. But now is one of these times I do disagree with President Trump, but I understand why he has endorsed Mike Johnson to be Speaker again. So I want to kind of give both sides of the argument, okay? Because while I disagree with it, I do understand it. I get why he's doing it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But first, let's go ahead and play this video from News Nation to give us more of a backdrop into this upcoming speaker's race, because Trump endorsing Mike Johnson does not guarantee that Mike Johnson is going to win easily. You have some Republicans coming out revolting against Mike Johnson because they feel like Mike Johnson has not done a good enough job as Speaker, pushing the conservative spending agenda that some Republicans feel is necessary to get the country back on track when it comes to solving the debt problem. Okay, and there's also other issues with Mike Johnson as well too. I would say that the base is probably not satisfied. Okay. I mean, I think Mike Johnson at this point has been basically marginal upgrade over Kevin McCarthy. Okay. But not a major upgrade, somewhat of a disappointment, but he's a good guy, right? I think that is what Mike Johnson has going for him the most. Okay. Nobody can say that he's a bad guy, right? He's not unlikable. Okay. He just may be stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point. And that is just kind of where we're at. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Just after the ball drops, all eyes will turn to the Capitol for Friday's House Speaker vote. President-elect Trump says he's putting his full support behind Mike Johnson, but the Speaker faces a tough battle for re-election, with more Republican lawmakers coming out against him, potentially setting the stage to stall this new Congress before they even get started. News Nation's Tom Dempsey has more from Washington. Tom, even with the president-elect's endorsement, how close are we thinking this vote might be?
Hey, good morning from the Capitol, Marky. Look, this House Speaker vote happening at Friday at noon still appears to be razor thin at the moment. And to put it in perspective, Congressman Mike Johnson needs almost every single Republican member to vote for him, assuming all Democrats vote against him. One lawmaker spoke right here on News Nation, describing himself as not yet a yes during this vote. But he says the vote on Friday does bring an important discussion within the Republican Party. Take a listen.
I don't think it's very realistic that somebody else is going to be able to come in and grab the reins. That's why I say most likely he will be the next speaker. But that doesn't mean there can't be conversations. This is where you have your leverage. This is the one time that you have before you elect a speaker to get assurances and a plan, something that makes sense to us.
Now, to hold on to being Speaker, like I said, Johnson can only afford to lose one fellow Republican, assuming all Democrats vote against him and all House members cast a vote. Already, Congressman Tom Massey.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now, before we get into the individuals who are basically pushing back against Mike Johnson being Speaker of the House, I want to talk about why is it that Trump selected Mike Johnson, right? Why did Trump endorse Mike Johnson? Well, the reason why is because it's the path of least resistance, right? It's the path of least resistance due to the fact that Speaker Johnson currently is Speaker of the House. And that means that he probably has the most votes right now out of anybody, right? So out of everybody else in the House that could possibly become leader, he has the most votes, okay? He's the closest one. Now, that doesn't mean that he has the votes to become Speaker. It just means that he has the best chance of becoming Speaker before January 6th. And this is important to note because on January 6th, Congress, they certified the election results. And it is unclear constitutionally whether or not that ceremony can be carried out without a new Speaker. So to make sure that Trump's transition goes smoothly, there needs to be a Speaker as soon as possible. And in order to get started on Trump's agenda, there needs to be a speaker as soon as possible. And the part of the Trump agenda that I think that Trump wants to get started on basically immediately is the economic agenda. Okay, the economic agenda, I think, is something that Republicans are going to try to get passed in the first part of this year. That is going to be one of the major first things they do in Congress, okay, is deal with the economy. And there's no doubt in my mind that Mike Johnson will be able to rally the Republicans around Trump's economic agenda. Like, there's no doubt, because for the most part, when it comes to Trump's economic agenda, most Republicans agree on these things, right? Outside of, the spending cuts and stuff like that. But I think that Mike Johnson will have no issues with that. I think what Mike Johnson would actually have issues with is when it comes to holding Democrats and their feet to the fire when it comes to foreign aid for Ukraine, okay? Because he's also going to have Republican backlash against that as well, too. And also when it comes to immigration, because the Republicans need to codify Trump's executive orders into law, okay? We cannot have a situation where Trump puts a Band-Aid on the problem of illegal immigration, which that is what executive orders are. They are Band-Aids, okay? And then you have some Democrat get elected in 2028, and then they rip off the Band-Aids and allow open borders once again, okay? We need a permanent fix. We need to codify Trump's border executive orders into law. That's what Republicans have to do. Now, the problem with that is that Republicans, again, they may not have all the votes in the House to do that, right? They may try to compromise with the Democrats. And that is the last thing that we need when it comes to immigration. So that is what I'm worried about when it comes to Speaker Johnson. And one of the reasons why I'm worried about this is because the House, their majority is so thin that Republicans don't have any real room for major disagreements, right? If there's major disagreements and more than one person doesn't want to go along with the rest of the Republicans, then you can't get anything done. And I think, again, on the more controversial issues, that's what's going to happen, okay? Immigration being more controversial, I think they're going to have a hard time with that. Trump's economic agenda, not so much. And this is why, ultimately, at the end of the day, for people who are upset about Speaker Johnson potentially becoming Speaker again, we have to expand our majority. The only reason that Mike Johnson is Speaker right now is because the majority is so thin. He's the only guy that can get all the votes. But if the majority was expanded, okay, if we can expand the majority in 2026, then that would allow us to have more leverage in regards to getting a speaker who's willing to hold the Democrats and their feet to the fire a little bit more. Okay, because one of my biggest criticisms of Speaker Johnson is the fact that it seems, just like Kevin McCarthy, he's willing to compromise with Democrats too quickly instead of trying to work with some of the Freedom Caucus members to actually have some real spending cuts. Because it's hard for me to be upset with the Freedom Caucus members who are dissatisfied with Speaker Johnson due to the fact that, hey, he's continuing to do things that he said he wouldn't do. Like, for example, these continuing resolutions at the last minute before a holiday break. He is not putting single subject bills on the floor to vote. These are things that people want. This is what the American people want. We want more transparency. And I don't think Speaker Johnson has done a good enough job at fulfilling his promises and doing the things that he promised that he was going to do. I don't blame them for being opposed to Mike Johnson at this point. I think that Mike Johnson should try to do these things because it's what's best for the country. It's what the American people want. And he should do a better job of trying to hold Republicans and Democrats accountable for getting on board with a more transparent agenda that the American people want. Getting on board with using our tax dollars more responsibly, which is something that the American people want. He can do that. He just chooses not to. He's a go along to get along type of guy, take the path of least resistance type of guy. And this is why I disagree with Trump endorsing him. But he may be the guy that we need at the time. Right now, we may need a go along to get along guy, because if we don't have a go along to get along guy, due to the slim majority of the Republicans, we may never have a speaker. And then you may end up with Hakeem Jeffries becoming speaker because some moderate Republicans get so frustrated with the process and they decide, hey, you know what, we're just going to vote for a Democrat, and you got a real bad situation. So, you know, there are no real good solutions to this speaker issue right now. And this is why I say the solution to this problem is to have a expanded majority, right? We have to expand the majority in the House in order to have more leverage over who should be speaker, okay? And who should be leading the Republicans in the House. So that's where we're at right now.
From Kentucky has come out against Johnson, posting to X earlier this week, quote, "We've seen Johnson partner with the Democrats to send money to Ukraine, authorize spying on Americans, and blow the budget." That brings us to other possible no votes, including Freedom Caucus Chair Andy Harris, who has described himself as being undecided, as well as former caucus chair Scott Perry and Congressman Andy Biggs. Congresswoman Victoria Spartz has also raised concerns about Speaker Johnson, saying he needs to lay out a plan to carry out President-elect Trump's agenda. On Monday, she released a list of requirements to earn her vote, including calling for spending audits. But like you said, Markey, Johnson picked up what could be the deciding endorsement on Monday from President-elect Donald Trump, who posted to Truth Social, quote, "The American people need immediate relief from all the destructive policies of the last administration. Speaker Mike Johnson is a good, hardworking, religious man. He will do the right thing, and we will continue to win." Johnson has also received support from billionaire Elon Musk. And we will note, too, that the House cannot conduct any sort of business until a House Speaker is elected. So, again, lots of people are going to be watching that vote on Friday at noon. Markey, the Republican Party, very much hoping to avoid similar drama to what we saw with former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Fun reminder, that was 15 ballots of voting over 4 days.
Yeah, nobody can forget that. We were all on the edge of our seat for 4 days in a row. So, Tom.
Yeah, so the issue that I have with the Republicans that are opposing Mike Johnson is that I think right now, going into the certification process, it's probably not the best time to do this, considering how we likely need a speaker to move forward with the certification. Also, on top of that, you would be basically incentivizing Mike Johnson to work with Democrats, okay? And if Mike Johnson has to work with Democrats in order to become speaker, then that further undermines Trump's agenda, right? Now, again, I don't have a problem with what the people who are holding out are asking for. I think what they're asking for are good things, right? They're asking for more transparency. They're asking for the government to be more responsible with spending. I don't understand why is it that this is so controversial. This is why I say I wish that Mike Johnson would actually hold the Democrats and the Republicans their feet to the fire in regards to trying to bring transparency to the government, right? To go along with spending audits, go along with single subject bills, get rid of these continuing resolutions. Let's actually focus on the budget. Let's do that. And let's see who's on board with actually trying to help right the ship. But again, Mike Johnson, he's not that type of guy, right? It seems to me that he's a path of least resistance type of dude. And that's what's going on here. But again, in this situation, that could be the only practical answer, right? Is to have a go along, get along guy as speaker, because again, we just don't have enough members in the House. We don't have a large enough majority to have that much leverage over Democrats and moderate Republicans. That could be what's going on here.
If Johnson isn't the Republicans' pick for Speaker, who could be?
Well, let's be clear. Again, House Speaker Mike Johnson looking very much like the favorite right now, but there's just so many uncertainties with this vote. Like we're seeing some criticism of how he's handled the job. So that's leading to this uncertainty with the vote. But it's important to note, too, that no one else has really expressed interest in being the next House Speaker besides Johnson. But that, to answer your question, who else might we see potentially emerge as a candidate? And if it's not Johnson, you can see some of them right here. Congressman Jim Jordan remains a popular lawmaker inside the Republican Party and even launched a brief bid, but failed bid to be Speaker after the Kevin McCarthy drama. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise may also be mentioned as an alternate, as well as House Majority Whip Tom Eber. But again, as of now, Johnson remains the favorite. But we're going to be closely watching any sort of developments leading up to this vote Friday at noon. Marky?
Yeah. So remember last year, guys, when Kevin McCarthy was overthrown, they went through, 15 rounds of voting to see who becomes Speaker? At one point, Jim Jordan was up to be the guy, and you had Republicans who just would not vote for him no matter what. They were just like, you know what, we'd rather work with Democrats. We'd rather make a deal with Democrats. We'd rather Hakeem Jeffries be Speaker than Jim Jordan. That's where some Republicans were at. So, I guess you can come out here and say, okay, well, it should be Jim Jordan, it should be somebody else. But again, the question is, do they have the votes? And can you get the Republicans, the so-called moderates, right, the liberal Republicans, can you get them on board with a Jim Jordan, to rally around Jim Jordan? That's the question. Again, it was tried last year. However, Trump wasn't in office. With Trump being in office now, who knows? If Mike Johnson can't get the votes and they have to pick somebody else, who would Trump get behind? Would it be Jim Jordan? And at that point, would that be enough to get him the votes? I mean, I'm not entirely sure how Jim Jordan would get the votes, or any of these guys, how they would get the votes if Mike Johnson can't get the votes, right? I don't know how that would work. I have no clue. So again, it's going to be something interesting to watch. The Republicans that are holding out their vote for Mike Johnson, they are risking delaying the certification process of President Trump. And who knows? Again, things could get ugly depending on how long this plays out. But I think that Mike Johnson, honestly, will probably work with the Democrats before he allows that to happen, which is something I also don't want either. So, again, this is not necessarily the best scenario, but I'm hoping that all the Republicans come together and they agree on a speaker without the Democrats' help. That is what I am hoping for. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.